Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Today we're going to take a good look at the Compare 2 by Joranalogue Audio Design. It's an 8HP Eurorack module and it's a dual window comparator. So let's take a look at what it does. Basically a comparator compares two voltages and sends out a logic output, like a positive gate, once an incoming voltage has surpassed a certain threshold. Well, a window comparator does that with a bottom threshold and a top threshold. So the gate will go positive as long as the incoming voltage is inside that window. So let's take a good look at what that would do, for example, to a triangle wave. Triangle wave here from the VCO1 by Leaf Audio, and we're going to look at it in my scope. And now we're going to take that parallel output from the Mordex data and we're going to send it to the input here of my Compare 2. Okay, now we're going to take that output of Compare 2 and we'll send it to my other trace in the oscilloscope. So as you can see, there's a certain voltage where the gate goes high, and then after another voltage it goes back down. You're getting 2 pulses per cycle of the triangle wave, so that should sound an octave higher than the triangle wave. Let's just listen to that triangle wave for a second. I'm gonna plug it into my... So now let's listen to... There we go. Let's play around with that a little bit. So I can shift the phase, right? That's an interesting effect, and it's quite different than pulse width modulation. So for example, let's send an LFO. It's LFO right here. Let's send it to an attenuator. And we'll take the output of the mixer and we're going to send it to that shift input right there. Now, cool. Now what we're animating there is the phase, not the width of the pulse. And as we get to audio rate, it's almost like a ring modulator effect. Alright, let's make it more subtle again. Now if I change the size, then you get that very narrow pulse getting phase modulated. Now what happens if we send another LFO to modulate that size? I'll just use one of my patch palette attenuators and we'll put that in the size. Wow, cool. That's quite a morphing tone now. Now let's make the size, centralize it, centralize the knob so it doesn't go silent. Alright, and let's modulate that rate, LFO rate, so that they make interesting rhythms together. Okay, now I'm going to use my joystick to modulate the pitch of the oscillator, x-axis, volt per octave. I'll bring down that bottom pitch. So cool, check out that drone. Now, what if instead of using these LFOs from these other modules, we actually use the filter 8 as an LFO. What's cool about that is that it's an octature LFO in low frequency mode. So that means we can get LFOs that are synchronized to each other and make interesting effects that way. So I'm getting 2 opposing. Just bring it down a little bit. A little faster. Again, audio rate. Cool, that'll sound better with some reverb and delay on it. There you go. Right, so why don't we use the joystick, the other axis, to control the filter 8, which is our LFO right now. So now with the joystick we can control both the central pitch of the oscillator as well as the speed of the LFO. So right now I'm using 2 opposing LFOs. Alright. Okay, so let's send it another oscillator into the other input. Now I'm going to take the triangle wave from the product into the input right there. Now we're going to take that output. Okay, so as you can see, they're moving simultaneously, moving together right now because there's normalization going on in there. So both the size CVs are normalized from left to right, and both the position CVs are normalized from left to right. But once I send it its own set of LFOs, now we're gonna get different movement. Okay, now let's listen to that. Going into another channel here on my mixer. That already sounds pretty cool, but what if we open it up in stereo? Huh? Add a little bit of effects. And already we can hear how it's alternating, how it's creating a sort of auto pan effect. We just need to control both oscillators with the joystick, so I'm gonna use a multiple for that. Alright, they're pretty much in tune. And now look at that movement between the yellow and the red on the oscilloscope. That's pretty cool. That's what we're listening to. We're listening to those two comparator outputs. Down here, there's some logic operations, AND, OR, XOR, and flip-flop. So those, when you're using it in audio rate, they can generate some pretty interesting subharmonics and some sort of derived oscillations too. We can take a look at some of these logic outputs. So here's the green is the AND, blue is the flip-flop. Let's listen to those two outputs now. That's the flip-flop output which is in the blue trace. Look what happens to it. As the comparators sweep, it's swapping octaves. We'll make this one central. Give it a little bass boost here on the mixer. And open up the other two. There it goes. So now I've got this cool drone happening here. And that's just two triangle waves from two different oscillators getting sent to the two window comparators, and we're modulating both parameters of each window comparator with 4 different outputs from the filter 8 acting as a quadrature LFO, because I'm only using 4 alternating outputs. So you can do some amazing risers that way. Really cool effects, really cool drones. You can even take a loop from that, for example, and then add a beat, and you have your industrial hit. That's compared to being used in audio rate as a phased and pulse width modulated square wave generator based on some triangle waves. Get an interval going here. Now let's move the joystick and have a little fun. Let's fudge with the central settings a little bit. Some very cool serendipitous rhythms, especially with that flip-flop output. Why don't we take another of those logic outputs? Check that out. Very cool. Very kind of lo-fi, low-bit sounding since the outputs are all digital. Basically listening to just ons and offs. As I change the relationship between the two oscillators, that's also going to change the way the logic outputs respond. So I've turned on some LFOs on the oscillators now. And now we're just going crazy here. This is just madness. The other thing I wanted to check out was using it in sub-audio frequencies with CV modulation sources and generating some gates from that and then maybe creating a rhythm. So I took two outputs from the filter 8, which is acting as an LFO right now, and I sent them to the two inputs of the comparator. I have all the settings centralized right now, and already I'm getting some really cool looking rhythmic patterns on the LEDs in the logic section here in the bottom. So I'm using the logic section to generate a rhythm, and then we're going to modulate that and see what happens to the rhythm. Basically, I took the AND output, and that's triggering a kick. Now I took the XOR output and I'm sending it to a multiple, and from the multiple I'm going to trigger an envelope generator, and I'm going to send that envelope generator to a VCA here, my hex mix VCA CV input, and we'll take a noise output from the Erica Synths modulator. Take that noise, stick it right there, and we'll turn on. So that's our hi-hat right there. Why don't I take the flip-flop output, which seems to be the least active one, and send it to a snare sound up there. I don't know, it's pretty much triggering same as the kick. What if I use this other one? That's more interesting. Our fourth voice could be the DFAM. So this is the DFAM right now. Turn off that delay. A little bit less reverb. Move it to a side here. Now I'll turn everybody off. It's kind of interesting. Now, what happens when I turn some of these knobs? There we go. Now, as we're changing the size of the windows and shifting their voltage thresholds, we get some really interesting varied sounds, varied rhythms. So let's modulate that with some other LFOs from the same filter 8. Wow, that's cool. That's a cool rhythm right there. I'm just modulating the shift of both windows right now. But if I take the opposing LFO to that and shift the sizes, there, it's almost We Will Rock You. Now, what if we randomize this a little bit? So instead of using these LFOs that are all sort of rhythmically related with some random voltages. That sounds like could be fun. First we'll try that with modulating the parameters. Shit. Alright, I'm back. We had a wee power failure. As I was waiting for my computer to reboot, I got this little rhythm happening here. We're using the Filter 8 as a quadrature LFO. Two outputs are going into the comparator inputs, and the other two outputs are modulating, each is modulating the size of a different one. So that's a pretty cool rhythm right there. Pretty danceable if you ask me. Let's play around with the shift and size knobs a little bit. Like a fill right there. Like a phased rhythm. This is cool. It's like crooked techno. Look at those divisions. Nice. Triplety. This is so much fun right here. It's like a totally unexpected drum machine using a quadrature LFO and a dual window comparator, and the logic outputs triggering voices. Yeah, with the shift, you can change the sort of swing. Alright, so what if I send two more LFOs to modulate the size? Size of the windows. There you go. Haha, cool. Super cool. I'm gonna try something more random now, rather than just outputs from the same synced LFO, right? So let's remove all of the. Now we're getting a rhythm that's just based on the knob positions. Listen to that. That's polyrhythmic right there. Pretty cool. Such a cool way to experiment and arrive at rhythms, unusual rhythms that you wouldn't program on a drum machine. And all modulatable. Let's send some random voltages in there. Very cool. Random. I'll use the random sources now as the inputs rather. And we use LFOs for the parameters. So this is like a free drummer now, free jazz drummer. There he goes. If I send other modulation, there he goes. modulator, Erica Synth modulator, and that'll go into the speed of the LFO. So now I have a random clock too. Cool. So that's pretty badass if you ask me. This is a pretty unbelievable module compared to simple in concept, but very potent in possibilities. So if you like this video, click like, subscribe, join my Patreon, hit the bell, you know, all that stuff. See you soon and stay noisy. All right.
Yeah.